welcome, Ken, and everybody else.
Thank you.
So, I'm at your disposal. What would you like to talk about today?
Okay, let's start with, your name is pronounced as Dana, right?
Dina Lynn.
Dina, yeah. So Dina, please give me a little bit of your Christian background, because I mean, as we know, religion shapes our personal conduct, our worldviews, and everything.
It does that. I was born into a family. I'm the firstborn of firstborns, and my father technically had an older brother, but he had the role of firstborn. And so I was born into a family that would have called itself nominally Christian, so Christian in name only. There was no overlay of religion for the first 14 years of my life. There was a lot of morality, so it was Christian influenced morality. Lots of black and white, lots of right and wrong, lots of behave yourself, be a good girl, lots of control. My parents were very young when I was born, and they were not ready to. I mean, is anybody ever ready to have a child? But they were very young. My dad was in law school preparing to go into the army, and when of course, he has his own story to tell, but Christianity came into my life when at age 14, my father, having his own life crisis, sought out the help of a chaplain in the army rather than a psychologist, and that kept it off his military record. And so all of a sudden, overnight, my father went from being godlike in my mind, in my eyes, to a Jesus freak, for lack of a better definition. This was the mid-70s when there was a large charismatic movement within Christianity, a lot of hippie influence. And while my father was very stoic and non-hippie, he would be the antithesis of hippie. It was very dramatic conversion experience for him, and had a big impact on my parents' marriage and on me. So my father introduced this concept of this Jesus, this Messiah, the Savior character, letting me know that we as human beings, according to the Christian teaching, we are born in original sin, separated from the source of all life, and to bridge this gap between us, the fallen creatures, and the perfect creator, God, Yahweh, Jehovah, Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior, came to die for our sins because we were all just sinful, and in order to be restored, connected back to God through this mediator of Jesus. So I heard all of this, and it was conceptual. We moved from where we were living in Texas at the time to Leavenworth, Kansas for 1 year of schooling for my father. And my father encouraged me to go to the local youth group at the chapel. And I'd never gone to a youth group before. I didn't know what to expect. It was a combination of both Protestant and Catholic youth, high school age, all together. And I walked into this experience. The director was an amazing man, just amazing. He did a lot of trust building exercises with us. He created an atmosphere of acceptance, of bearing our souls to one another. And I looked around this room of these teenagers. Typically, teenagers are going through an awful stage of development and withdrawn, and there's a lot of persona projection. I saw high school boys, like star athletes, hugging each other and crying and connecting. There was this sense of community that so spoke to me. When you're an Army brat, you move a lot. So every year to two, I had to uproot and physically move and say goodbye to everybody. So this community that I saw in front of me had a huge impact, a large imprint on me, a longing for that feeling of belongingness. And I dove in. We did retreats. We did a musical called Godspell. I had one of the leading roles in that. One of my best friends who played lead guitar turns out to be the rock star Melissa Etheridge. We were friends back then in Leavenworth. And the the connection was incredible. So on stage during Godspell, we see the crucifixion and resurrection scene played out dramatically with wonderful music. And during the resurrection moment where they take this dead Jesus character and throw him in the air and he comes back to life, it got real for me. This wanting a connection with the Jesus that I saw in Godspell in my youth group. I wanted that. It felt like unconditional love and acceptance, and it was palpable. And unfortunately, after leaving there in 1977 and moving to Washington, D.C., and ever since, I have not been able to find or replicate that same sense of community and connection. So the rest of my 30 plus years of being a Christian continued to be this search for that groundedness, that sense of identity and connection and belonging that I experienced when I was 15.
Right. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. And Dina, you told me that you had what is called a Kundalini experience.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let me set the stage for that a little bit. Now you have to understand, at the time this happened to me, I was 42 years of age. I had been married for 16 years. I had 7 of my eventual 8 children. I had 2 of my eventual 3 miscarriages, and my world had become consumed by Christianity. I had married a man when I was 24 who was a Messianic Jew, raised Jewish, converted to Christianity. He went to seminary. He became a clergy person within the church. He was bivocational. He worked for as a salesman for the government, and he was also a pastor. And I was a homeschooling mom of my then 7 children, and I was sold out to Christianity, and I was completely sexually frigid. I had been taught that, well, what I interpreted anyway, this wasn't objectively taught, but what I interpreted was that spirituality was on this unattainable pedestal. We had to strive and strive and strive to have the right beliefs, the right attitude, the right confession, etc. And sexuality was relegated to the proverbial gutter. It was the dirty deed we had to do in order to procreate, in order to make new humans, and God put up with it. But we weren't supposed to really enjoy it. We weren't supposed to be animalistic about it, and kind of like, assume the missionary position and don't enjoy it too much, and don't smile too big, and just do what you have to do for God and country, that kind of. And so I was frigid. Did
the husband at the time share that view?
It's so hard to know what people honestly believe when we're told what we're supposed to believe within the church. He certainly wanted more of a genuine sexual relationship and connection with me. He tried to please me, tried to meet me, tried to make it good for me, but my skin would crawl. The idea of being touched sexually, really? I didn't want it. When you don't have sexual desire, the mechanics feel mechanical. It's like, no different than, rubbing your elbow, like, can you stop now? It's getting annoying. There was no desire. There was no arousal. There was no passion. There was just me, fist clenched, lip curled, eyes tight. Okay, get it over with. And I'd be fantasizing about things like unloading the dishwasher to get through it. And then as soon as we were done, I'm off and running. And I would put it off. I would avoid it. Toward the end of this, before the Kundalini experience, I was sleeping on the couch. I was avoiding hugs. I didn't want to kiss him. And I would never, ever, ever want foreplay. It just get it over with. So it was miserable for me. It was equally miserable for him. And after the birth of my 7th child, I was thinking a couple of months postpartum had lapsed since we had had any sexual activity. 14 months went by with him not saying a word because he got tired of the rejection. And when I was aware of that, oh, wow, 14 months. And so my prayer at the time would have been, can you please help me to endure this once a week if I have to, just to keep him at bay? That was, I didn't want to want desire. So that's how it had been for a long time. So I was 42 years of age.
Yeah,
it was
that should be a sexual peak for a woman,
right? Well, it turned out to be. It turned out to be. I didn't know how it could be. I'm sitting in a church parking lot in my car. I'm waiting for my eldest son's drum lesson to get over. It was a Monday afternoon, May 24th, 2004, and 3:45 p.m. I had just glanced at the clock to see, when his lesson would be over. And I wasn't thinking sexual thoughts because I never thought about sexual thoughts. I was looking at the dogwoods in the trees and how pretty they looked. And I thought, it's late May in Washington, D.C. area, but it's not humid. How amazing. And then all of a sudden, I feel this jolt of energy. It felt like it originated inside of me, and it went up and down and up, and just over and over, like in waves and shooting through my body. And it felt terrifying and exciting at the same time. And I remembered thinking, this is too good. This has to be sinful. I'm going to have to repent. I mean, it's got to be immoral, unethical, maybe illegal, but I'm going to enjoy it before I confess it, because I felt like I went from Wizard of Oz, black and white Kansas, to Technicolor Oz in a second, in a downloaded nanosecond. And I didn't know what was happening to me. I had no reference for this. I had never heard of Kundalini. If I had, I would have thought it was something demonic. By the way, I was trained to believe things. But I remember thinking, well, it wasn't even a thought. It was just like a sudden awareness of, oh, I get it. I'm supposed to enjoy sexuality. It is as sacred and beautiful as spirituality. So instead of these two polarities, like this, they were like this. Spirituality and sexuality became the two flip sides of the same coin, and they were both sacred and both profane. And they are the two energies that comprise every human being. And the lower three chakras are of the earth, feminine, sexual. The upper three chakras are of the cosmos, masculine, spiritual. And they meet at the bridge of the heart, where we connect to everyone and everything. And no one had to teach me this. No one could have. I just suddenly knew that I knew that I knew that everything I had believed about sexuality before was wrong. And this experience was more truthful to me than all of the doctrine and all of the dogma I had ever been taught by others. This was first-hand, personal experience that could not be invalidated.
Is it sexual in nature? Sensual?
It's well, yes, and there is no separation for me, now that I've had this experience, between the spiritual, the ephemeral, and the sexual, which is of the earth. So it's a merging, a blending of these two energies. And it's for me, there's no such thing as saying that's just sexual or that's just spiritual. They came together. They're permanently fused together. And
but it is orgasmic, right? It involves an orgasm, does it?
Oh, of course. Sexual connection, the act of intimacy, and I am a heterosexual monogamous woman, so that's my framework for it. Everyone's wired uniquely, and we all need to know who and how we are. But for me, that coming together of masculine, feminine, yin yang, coming together as one flesh, is the most spiritual thing that I can do with my earth suit in the human life.
Mm-hmm. And you were all by yourself. There was no...
all by myself, yeah. Yeah, totally by myself. I hadn't even experienced my first orgasm at that point. This was just being infused with aliveness so it was yes spiritual, yes sexual at the same time. Just I was so alive, where before life felt flat, treadmill.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, wow is the word. Wow.
So you had no orgasm before this experience?
No, not.
Even though that you were married for many years, you must have
Yes.
married for like 20 years.
You have to enjoy sex. You have to have arousal. There's different levels of the arousal experience. There's the initiation, there's the arousal lining up, there's the plateau, and then there's the spike of orgasm, and then the release. And I didn't have those components before. It was all mechanistic. It was all, I birthed 7 babies before I ever had my first orgasm. And it took some doing. It didn't happen automatically. I had to work at having that first orgasm. It didn't come naturally.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, it was truly amazing. It did a lot of healing for my marriage. We had several good years. In the aftermath of, I discovered a website that was designed for married Christian couples to discover the biblically and scientific perspectives of sexuality, because the Christian church doesn't allow there to be, in most circles, doesn't allow there to be a healthy discussion about sexuality. It's like, oh, just go do that thing, but let's not talk about it. It's unseemly, and make sure you don't stray. And the woman needs to give herself over in obedience to her husband. Just all kinds of teachings that are esoteric and not accurate of how we're wired. I got very, very prolific in this website. I was like a kid in a candy store. And then unfortunately, those posts were used as evidence for me committing some kind of sin in desiring my own husband. And he was excommunicated and defrocked. He had to resign his ordination, and we were shunned by our entire community. And we ended up moving cross country from Washington, D.C. to Oregon, here where I am now. That was in 2005, a year after the Kundalini Experience. So in the aftermath of this excommunication and being shunned by our community, I was reeling. I knew what happened to me was true, was divine. It was more divine than anything I'd been taught. And I remember praying, realizing we had just had everybody turn against us, and that I had not sinned, that desiring my own husband was good and healthy. I remembered saying to the God that I understood then, I want truth at all cost. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. I did not know then what it would cost me, what I would lose, but also how precious it was. And it took 6 years of questioning everything I believed, including about my marriage. And after, incrementally in those 6 years of deep inquiry, I ended up leaving both Christianity and my marriage. I shed them. They no longer fit me. And in 2010, I left the marriage and was divorced. And it's been a very different life ever since then. So no longer married, no longer Christian, but I still highly value sexuality, and I consider it to be sacred.
Did you have more than one Kundalini experience, or was it just that?
Just that one. Just that one. It revolutionized everything. So I didn't need it. I didn't even know what to call it. I called it the miracle for many years. And it was once I had left Christianity and I was exploring the world of spirituality and all of its flavors, all the things that had been forbidden to me before. I was, without the threat of hell hanging over me, I was free to explore all kinds of things. So shamanism, Buddhism, Hinduism, things that didn't even have labels, just experiences. And I remember one day, now I'd heard about this Kundalini thing, and all of these people were seeking after it, how to activate their pineal gland and then how to activate their chakras. And I remember reading all I could about it and wanting it, really wanting it. And one day I was describing to my friend, a friend I was talking to online, I said, you know, I really want to have this Kundalini thing. And he said, tell me again about that thing that happened to you in the church parking lot. So I described it again. He goes, what do you think that was? He said, you're searching all over the world for something you already had, which is, you know, the irony of the hero's journey, right? We have to go out there looking for the thing to come back home and realize, wait, I had it. I had it all the time. And that was one of those moments where all you can do is laugh at the absurdity of the whole thing. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, that thing, that miracle, that was a Kundalini experience. And yeah, it did. It revolutionized my everything and catapulted me out of all I knew. Kind of like my soul in cahoots with Source, Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it, kind of leaned over in that parking lot and went, that one, let's mess with that one. And the irony that it took a sexual awakening to get me out of spiritual imprisonment is, I mean, it's funny. It's a cosmic joke, and it's my ground of being. It's the moment that changed everything for me. It's my reference point.
I see. What that tells me is that it's not. It can be something very spontaneous. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, cultivated. Because
I wouldn't know how to cultivate it. If people have asked me, can you help me have this experience? And I wish I had the formula, because I mean, I wouldn't have to work another day in my life. I could just, you know, share the secret. And I wish I knew how to replicate that for other people. I wasn't asking for it. It wasn't in my frame of reference. I didn't know what the word meant. And it found me. Of all people, me.
Yeah. I mean, all I can think of is because, you know, at age 40, you were at your, basically your sexual peak.
Yes.
And
biologically speaking, yes.
There was a part of you that, you know, has never been activated, right?
Right.
Or you have been suppressing it.
Yes.
So because of all this pressure, right, that you exerted, you know, to stay away from that part of the self, it's just like Newton's third law. I mean, for every action, there's a reaction.
Right.
So you're just building up. So until, you know, I'm glad that actually it took a relatively, you know, non-harmful form of, you know, surging, right?
Right.
It could have been worse. I mean, it could have been, yeah.
Absolutely. I've heard some interesting stories about Kundalini experiences that look like psychotic breakdowns.
Yeah.
The only thing is, though, I still know so many women, definitely those who are within Christianity or another form of repressive religion, or just in general, who are repressed, who have been shoving sexual energy down, negating it, denying it, denigrating it, who don't have either a Kundalini experience or an awakening of some sort. Women who go their whole lives through declaring that sexuality is a negative and ignoring it and denying it and suffering the consequences of that within their own being and also within their relationships, because it is meant to be. Sexuality is the most powerful vehicle that we humans can experience, which is why the church and anyone who's been in patriarchy has been afraid of female energy, sexual energy in particular. It's been repressed. Women who were obviously sexual or had healing powers were called witches and burned at the stake and all kinds of other horrible atrocities. And women have been shoved down and repressed for millennia, because of the fear of the raw power of female sexual energy and what it can do to bring change.
Yeah, as I understand it from history or even prehistory, right? The suppression of female sexuality came at the time when the patriarchy also rose.
Yes,
And that was
absolutely.
about, I would say, at least 8,000 years ago.
I agree. That's what I've also
Yeah.
experienced in my own studies and my own reading. There's evidence that prior to about 8,000 years ago, so about the time that Genesis would have been written down, it was brought from Sumer by Abram, who became Abraham. So it's an older story. This Genesis story is not it's a metaphor of what life was like pre-fall, not fall into sin, but fall into the ego of patriarchy. When humans saw that new life was coming out of female wombs, and it was assumed there must be this goddess, this goddess Kunti, the goddess of all life, from which we get the word cunt, which is used derogatorily against women. So all that was beautiful about the divine feminine was repressed and replaced by patriarchy. So in the garden story, the Garden of Eden story, we have the serpent, which is the symbol for the divine feminine, who's framed as the enemy when the serpent was the only one telling the truth, saying, you'll be like gods, which is the point. We are supposed to be, we are divine human entities, and we are meant to be fully human and fully divine in one package. That's our spirituality and our sexuality coming together in this beautiful yin yang that's never meant to be separated. So everything that was about the divine feminine got replaced like a really bad PR deal, so that the angry sky god replaced the goddess Kunti, and it became a disconnection. And then you see women being relegated to an inferior position, whereas before there was equality. The grave sites that have been discovered prior to about 8,000 years ago are equal in size, so no more honor given to the men who were buried, and no weapons in these graves. There was no war, there was no murder, there was the occasional hunting accident, because there was collaboration and cooperation with the divine feminine being the oversight. And then there's some geological, archaeological evidence that there was a shift in going from lush areas to arid areas. So the Sahara used to be a lush, beautiful jungle, and it got turned into, geologically speaking, rapidly into desert. And all of a sudden food is scarce. So you don't have women gathering abundant food and sharing. You have men having to hunt the scarce animals because they were bigger, stronger, faster. And women became denigrated and men became higher valued. And all of that competition, like if it's you versus me hunting for that antelope, two guys, then one of us is going to win. And that was the rise of the ego, the rise of competition and scarcity rather than abundance and connection. And it's been a really long, really bad 8,000-ish years, but it looks like we're reaching a crescendo where we're recognizing if we humans don't learn to cooperate and collaborate, we're going to compete ourselves to death. We'll become extinct. It's an interesting time to be alive right now.
You know, Stephen Hawking, who is the physicist, predicted that humans would go extinct within 100 years.
Yeah, it's a jury's out on whether we survive ourselves. And you know, all of these things happening right now with the COVID pandemic, it's exposing all of the ways in which we've become separated and corrupt, and it's showing us what's not working about this artificial culture we've built up. And we're shifting from one age to another, and every time there's an age shift, there's a clash between the people who cling to the old and the people who are moving into the new. And we, according to my astrological friends, we just skipped over that center point of the 200-year overlap, January 26th of this year. So no wonder things are like, you know, fiercely intense between these two different groups of humans.
Yeah. According to my understanding, all these things are, you know, tied together. So, so this respect towards women is tied to this respect towards nature, which is Mother Nature. Right?
Absolutely.
And the persecution and, you know, subjugation of all the peoples who are close to the mother, you know, just like the Native Americans.
Yes, all the Aboriginal groups have gone through intense persecution in recent years. I mean, think about patriarchy causes the masculine to be elevated at the expense of the feminine, so that within ourselves, the masculine mind sees itself as better than the emotional feminine heart, even though there's more electromagnetic energy coming from the heart than from the brain. The heart communicates more to the brain than the brain does to the heart. So and then within couples, you see that too. Within our traditional society, the man is elevated over the woman. And then the way that we humans, as a masculine species, has denigrated Mother Earth. We've raped and pillaged our planet, and it needs to be healed, I believe, truly starting with each of us, recognizing that our heart, the feminine, and our mind, the masculine, are meant, again, to be yin yang, different but equal, beautifully different, to be celebrated in the distinctions. Because the solution is not what I see modern feminism doing, the fourth wave feminism, which is to male bash, to blame men as if men caused patriarchy. Because most men have suffered under patriarchy. Unless you were a wealthy landowner, you were a serf or a slave or a servant or a soldier. You did all the big, bad, ugly jobs, and you died early. Most men did not. They were overburdened while women were repressed. And now as the feminine rises up, it's not to be over the men, because that's more masculine. Being over is masculine. The feminine wants to be alongside, together, different and together, side by side, bringing out the best in each other and working toward whatever this benevolent future can really be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And what better than the act of sex itself between two people who value and respect and honor and love each other, coming together and celebrating those beautiful differences where the man can be fully a man, and he gets to take that testosterone and that initiation and pursue her, and she gets to surrender and submit and receive, and they're mutually surrendering to each other. It's a beautiful divine dance. Yeah. But we've turned it into something sordid and shameful. We all carry around so much shame about our own sexuality, and we need to be healed of that so that we can again see sexuality as a sacred thing. And that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable and that we can't enjoy the shadow side of it, and it can't be aggressive and playful and the whole experience of that dance with each other. We're meant to be pushed past our limits when it comes to sex, within, of course, with consent, with trust, with all that goes with love, as well as the sexual expression. And when we find someone who matches us like that, and we can give ourselves over to the experience, there's nothing more spiritual than that. There's nothing more empowering. Orgasm itself is a creative energy. It always brings new life, and sometimes, occasionally, a new human baby, but always new life. It's the Big Bang, it's like the point of creation itself in that we get to taste and experience.
Yeah. And also I think creative people like writers, artists, and all these, they tend to have a more colorful sex life. I mean, I think it's related.
Well, imagination is the sexiest organ there is. Yes. Our ability to conceive of what we want, to have a desire in our mind, and then to manifest it and to experience it with our five senses and our imagination and our intuition and our initiation and all of the senses, not just the literal physical ones, but to take it on the literal level, the symbolic level, the mythic level, the archetypal level, the ethereal, spiritual level, the ineffable level. We get to F with the ineffables, we get to be like God. We get to have this dance with creation, and there's so much to explore there. And so to just take it into this is to make a baby, or this is to just get our frustrations out, or just to have a sexual fulfillment. We sell ourselves so short from the potential of everything that a sexual experience is meant to give us. And I can't settle for less than all I know that it can be. There's a lifetime worth to explore here. So the idea of being with, you know, serial partnerships when it's shiny and exciting and, you know, falling in love limerent stage, and then, oh, it's getting hard now. No, stick with it. There's gold on the other side of that struggle. And the sexual connection is meant to be strong enough that it helps us as couples to get through the hard part, to get to the other side. And intimate relationships to me are the primary catalyst for growth and expansion and spiritual development. It's when you're intimate with another person, it's like you're handing them a knife and you're saying, here, I'm going to trust you to do soul surgery on me without anesthesia. And you know you're giving them the ability to use that as a weapon against you. But the trust says, I'm trusting you to do this with me. And the way that we can explore the depths of what's in the psyche, what's in the shadow, what's in the soul that wants to come out. There's nothing quite like an intimate sexual partnership where there's trust and love and commitment and honor and mutual respect for that to grow. I mean, I can't think of anything more beautiful or more powerful. Beats every religion, hands down.